A Bakugan
What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So this past weekend, I had the privilege to fly out to Spin Master headquarters in Los Angeles to go ahead and try out the brand new relaunch of Bakugan, but also the launch of the trading card game version as well. Because previously, Bakugan had just like the little balls and they'd fight, and that was pretty much all it was. But they actually have a fully fledged TCG now, and I gotta admit, I was a little bit skeptical, but I just really kind of, now that I'm back from this whole entire trip, really wanted to share my honest thoughts about the game so that you guys, because a lot of you guys were expressing interest about this on social media as I was posting about it, and so I wanted to give you guys my honest feedback about the game. Since I got to play it for about 48 hours, I got about 30, 40, 50 games in, and there's a lot I really want to discuss here. Now, full disclosure, Spin Master did fly me out for this event, so they were paying for the airfare, the hotel, all that stuff, which I'm entirely grateful for, but I do want you guys to know that even though they did all that, I'm still giving you guys my honest feedback. They're not paying me for this video. There's no obligation for me to make this video. This is because I wanted to bring this content to you, and there's actually a lot I really do want to talk about, so I want you guys to form your own opinion for yourselves. So just wanted to get that out there. You guys know that I value integrity, and I really just want to be upfront and transparent with you with everything. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the Bakugan Trading Card Game, yeah, this is it's something that it's so different because they do things that other card games don't. You can't really compare it to anything. Like, it has elements of, Magic and then like Vanguard and like Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, they almost took like a lot of the really good things about each of these games and tried to get rid of like the worst parts of each of them as well. So how do you play the game? Well, the object of the game is to mill out your opponent. So what's really interesting about this game is that your deck is your life. So basically, you have to think about card economy in this really fascinating way, because every single time you draw a card, you're actually putting yourself closer to death. So it's kind of like Hearthstone if you're playing Warlock, where every time you draw, you take 2 damage. This is kind of the exact same thing. So as card game players, we love drawing cards because, card advantage is everything. And if you have more cards, your life total really doesn't matter because you're probably in a more advantageous position because you have more resources than your opponent. This game, you have to kind of rethink that, because if you draw too many cards, you might put yourself in a position that you're going to be much more likely to lose. Like, for instance, there's a 4 energy card that when you play it, it draws 3 cards, which is like, that's fantastic, right? Well, in that certain game where I had the opportunity to play that, had I done that, my opponent could have actually attacked me and killed me on that turn. So I made the strategic decision not to play it, which is very counterintuitive because you always want to be drawing cards, and I ended up not losing that game because I made that decision. So you have to kind of rethink, just card economy in general, because it's this very fascinating counterbalance with your life total. And so basically the Bakugan, in terms of damage, when they're attacking and they successfully win a battle, they deal damage in the form of milling. So they have what's called a damage rating, which I'll probably show on the screen here to highlight. So some might have like a damage rating of 5. So that means that if that attack goes through, they're gonna mill 5 cards off the top of their deck. So pretty simple. So how do you start to play? Well, you have a 40 card deck, and that's a fixed number. You can't have like 60, because you have to remember, your deck is your life total. So any card you add, it's like you're giving yourself more life. So everyone would like play with 60 card decks. So it's a 40 card deck. You can only play 3 copies of a single card. You draw 5 cards at the start of the game, and then you draw 1 card every single turn. So that's all like Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So we're all pretty familiar with that. Now, another really interesting aspect of this game is that you and your opponent share a turn. So most traditional card games, you either roll a die, flip a coin, rock, paper, scissors, whatever, and that's how you decide who goes first or second. This game doesn't have that. You actually take your turns at the same time. So at the start of a turn, you both draw a card at the same time. You both place an energy at the same time. It's really interesting, and it's kind of weird to get used to at first, but I actually kind of like it because it kind of gets rid of that whole dynamic that, oh, I didn't go first because I lost kind of mentality that a lot of card games pretty much face, especially nowadays. But I did mention energy. Yes, this game does have an energy system. So basically it's a mana system just like Magic or Hearthstone or any other resource-based system. You know, us Yu-Gi-Oh players don't know what the fuck a resource is. But yeah, so it's an energy system. Now, what's interesting about the energy system in Bakugan is that when you place your energy, you take the card and you place it face down. The energy has no color identity. So when you have a game like Magic, you know, Mountain is red, or like when you have like Dragon Ball Super card game, for instance, you know, you play a red card, that means it's a red energy. The energy in Bakugan has no color identity, so you can use that energy to play any color card that you want. So it seems pretty good, right? But then how is that balanced? Well, the color balancing comes with your specific Bakugan. Now, the Bakugan have their own different colors, and you pick 3 of them. Whatever color of Bakugan that you pick, those are the color of cards that you're locked into. So for me personally, I had a blue, a red, and a white Bakugan, so I was allowed to play blue cards, red cards, and white cards, but I couldn't play green, black, or gold. So that's kind of like where the balancing comes in, and I really like that because it takes away from the dynamic of, you know, getting mana screwed or not being able to play certain cards because you don't have the specific color to play it, but because it's balanced by the type of Bakugan that you have, so you're still locked into specific colors. I think they did a really good job at approaching it that way. And you could play like 3 blue Bakugan if you wanted to. We were just playing with starter kits, so we only had like a few options to choose from. But the thing is, if you play all blue Bakugan, you're locked into a specific color. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, but for the purposes of this, everyone had different colors, so that's kind of like how we went about it. Now, something that's really crazy about this game that took a little bit of time to get used to, every card is a quick effect, yeah, or like an instant for Magic speak. So you can play like 95% of the cards in the game at any time. As long as you have the energy to play them, you can play them whenever you want. And that's kind of crazy if you think about it. Now, it seems overpowered, but you have to think, because you're sharing a turn with your opponent and there's no like back and forth on the turns, that kind of makes sense, right? If everything weren't a quick effect, then it wouldn't really exactly have this flow to it. So I think that's actually okay, but it actually kind of incorporates a lot of strategic thinking behind it because, you know, it shows and dictates when you can play certain cards because you can decide, okay, do I want to play this card pre-combat? Do I want to play it after combat? Do I want to play it during the end step? So, and it kind of influences and gives you a lot of control over the decision making, and that's what I really like about this game. It never really felt like things were out of my control, and especially from a card playing perspective, anyone who's played card games for a very long time, and I think when I talked to Team APS, they also agreed, you feel like you have a lot of control over the decision making and how you're going to dictate the course of the game. So I think that's a really good thing that they got down right. Another thing is that, you know, it really simplifies the learning curve too, because when you're learning a card game and you're having to learn when you can use certain cards, like, oh, you can only use this during your turn, you can only use this during your opponent's turn, you know, that can just be kind of frustrating to get used to, even though that's not too difficult. But basically by telling someone, oh, you can play this card whenever, you know, that makes it really easy to learn. And, you know, we picked it up really quickly because there's not so many restrictions on things. You were just able to kind of play things as long as you had the energy to do so. So I really like that. It kind of just really simplified it and added just another layer of complexity for the more hardcore competitive players like myself. So I want to give you guys the basic like turn structure of how a turn kind of plays out before we get into more detail. So how it works is you and your opponent draw a card, then you each play an energy. You don't have to if you don't want to, and then you're basically going to go most likely to the point where you're going to battle your Bakugan. So you pick a Bakugan, your opponent picks one, then you roll them out, and as basically you get to the point where you're doing combat, and then once combat's all finished up, you go to the end step where if you want to, if you have any leftover energy or any cards you want to play, you can go ahead and do that. So like that card I mentioned earlier that cost 4, that drew me 3, there was a turn where I didn't do anything, so I just decided to play that just so I could get 3 cards out of it, and I didn't waste that mana that energy for the turn. But let's get into the good stuff, because you guys are waiting for the combat. Now, the combat system in this game is like no other game because it has the Bakugan, right? But before we get into the Bakugan themselves, I need to talk about the Baku cores. Now, these are essentially little hexagonal tiles that you place on the board at the beginning of the game, and these are what trigger the magnets in the Bakugan so that they open up. Now, each you and your opponent are going to bring 6 of these tiles with you, in addition to your 3 Bakugan that you're playing with, as well as your 40 card deck. And when the game starts, right before you draw your first card, you're going to take turns placing these tiles in the middle of the table. Now, these cores have special abilities underneath them, and they each have a little symbol that kind of gives a hint as to what that core might do. And so some of these have positive effects and some of them have negatives. So you might want to put the positive ones closer to you to try to hit your own cores, or you could put the negative cores closer to your opponent's side so that way they have a higher chance of hitting those, getting some sort of negative modifier. And basically, as long as the edges are touching, that's pretty much all you have to do to set one core next to another. And it kind of creates these very intricate patterns that are on the table, and they never look the same. Out of the 30 or 40 games that I played over the weekend, no two, cores, like assemblies, looked the same, because sometimes it was like a little circle, sometimes it was like just clustered all over the place, sometimes it was like an X, sometimes it was like a big, long, narrow, straight line, and that's kind of neat. It kind of changes up how the game works every single time, and it's just kind of adds another element of skill, just depending on the types of cores that you're using and how they get assembled onto the board. So guys, that's going to do it for part 1 of my massive overview of the Bakugan Trading Card Game. Be sure to stick around for part 2 because I still have a lot more to talk about. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you really enjoy the type of content that I produce on this channel, then consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because it's thanks to each and every one of my supporters that I'm able to bring you this content on a daily basis. So guys, thank you so much again, and we'll see you next time.